Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us today for the second Kenya Food Systems Lab. We look forward to engaging with all of you today, and we really appreciate your participation. It's exactly 5 minutes past 10 now, East Africa time. So I think it's a good for us to start, perhaps just initiate the introductions and get going. We've got a really jam-packed schedule with a lot of very interesting presenters and panelists. So for the sake of time, we can kick off the second Food Systems Lab. My name is Ivan Poe. I'm a professional officer at ICLEI Africa, working under the Urban Systems Unit and very much focused on issues around urban food systems and food system sustainability, and particularly issues relating to governance around food systems. Before we start the session, I would like to just run over some of the house rules. This session is being recorded, and by participating in the session, you are automatically giving your consent to be recorded. All of the recordings will be made available to the participants and uploaded onto YouTube, as well as our project page, the ICLEI Africa food page, of which the link will also be shared. Then all the outcomes and recommendations and strategies that emerge from this dialogue and conversation will also be captured and shared with the participants in the form of a report after. My colleague Sinetemba, who's also on the call, will be taking quite thorough notes. So we really do invite all of the participants to use the chat function as much as possible. Please go ahead from the beginning to take the opportunity to introduce yourself, who you are, what your designation is, where you work, and what your expectations for today's session is. We'll also be welcoming all of the participants to, whenever they have questions or recommendations, to also use the chat function, and we can then use that to capture some of the outcomes and interesting insights that emerge from this session. So, as I said, this is the second Kenya Food Systems Lab, which is part of the engagements of the Food Systems Dialogue being organized by ICLEI in strong collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization. And the intention behind this exchange is to really streamline and mechanisms for promoting greater coordination in food systems governance between different levels of government, between the national and the local level, as well as different departments in the government, and then also integration of stakeholders that fall beyond the realms of government, such as non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, and very importantly, the private sector. And we've got presenters that represent all of these stakeholder groups, as well as intermediaries that have the role of bringing these stakeholder groups together. So through these presentations, we hope to spark some ideas, spark some new ways of thinking about food and the way in which food is governed in the context of Kenya. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Tito Arunga, who is the Food and Agriculture Organization's sub-program lead for inclusive value chains, just to offer an official opening on behalf of the key representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization in Kenya. So without further ado, over to you, Mr. Tito Arunga.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ivan. I hope you can hear me clearly. Excellent, excellent. Good morning, everybody. Thanks. Let me most sincerely bring the apologies of the FAO representative, Madam Carla Mukavi, who has had to join a mission with the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Madam Amina Mohammed. They're on the way to Kajiado, basically to look at the situation with the drought. As you know, Kenya is heavily affected with the drought situation. So she sends her apologies, but has asked me to represent her. And I thank you, and thank you for this convening on this food systems conversation, which is a very important conversation. If you will allow me, Evan, I'd like to put up a few slides just to give some reflections. I hope the participants are able to see my slides on the screen. Even if you can confirm this, excellent, thank you. Thank you very much. Hold on, I'll just. Okay, good, thanks. So, how do I get rid of this? Yeah, so basically, oh dear. Yeah, I mean, for Kenya, as we see it, there's still a lot that needs to be done in dealing with the overall situation. We see the prevalence of undernourishment, the severe food insecurity, the prevalence of severe food insecurity, and this has really come out now, where we have almost 20 counties facing severe drought. So we have a critical situation in the country. And this definitely has an overall impact on the overall poverty situation, nutrition situation. And what has really affected our situation today is mainly related to, of course, the effects of the pandemic. Secondly, the issues around climate change. Climate change has been a major impact, has had a major impact on our country. And therefore, you know, we see this drought situation. And also the conflicts that are going on around the world, which have also affected things, led to a high cost of food prices, including both food and feed. So I think by the time the summit was being convened, the Food System Summit Dialogues, it was really clear that, you know, food systems are central to all the SDGs. And particularly for us in Kenya, you know, what agriculture contributes to our GDP essentially shows how critical this sector is. So, of course, the summit was convened around these 5 areas on ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all, shifting to sustainable consumption patterns, boosting nature-positive production, advancing equitable livelihoods, and building resilience to vulnerabilities and shock. I know my colleague Sharon from government will talk about how this process took place in Kenya, because it was a very robust process that really brought, you know, all the stakeholders around the country into the conversation. So we did this, and from our side at the UN, you know, we came together as one UN to support this process. A number of the agencies, and mainly the Rome-based agencies, were very involved with this, also coupled with other agencies like UNICEF, UN Women. So we were very involved in this process, and we supported it right from the convenings that happened at sub-regional level to the national dialogues. And as a result, I think Kenya really positioned itself well on this, and eventually emerged with a number of different pathways, which Sharon will talk about. But what have we done since then? From our side, and this I talk of from the UN side, we mapped out, looked at all these pathways and all the coalitions that the government of Kenya had signed up to. And, we started seeing within the work that we are doing and supporting the government in, what are some of the different programs and projects that we could align. And you'll see from my slide there, right at the end, the UN initiatives contributing to the pathways. You'll already see that, there are a number of programs that are going on, some that are aimed at creating decent employment for young people, some that are aimed at empowering women, on some pipelines around resilient livelihood programs in the arid counties, the Farm to Market Alliance program. You see all this based on the first pathway on increasing the number of young women, people and women with access to productive resources. Already, we mapped out to see our ongoing programs around that. Even on the second pathway around increasing the uptake of digital agricultural solutions, there's some big programs, a big land program, land digitalization program that's going on in the country, the Kenya Integrated Market Information System, others, development of youth innovation centers. So you can see that there are already a number of programs going on around this, improving diversity of diets and heightening climate action. So this, we've already mapped up very well, and some of them are fairly large projects that are going on. And we hope that this can support, even as we continue running the implementation on these pathways, and we are able to then support the Kenyan government as we report on the deliverables along this. So besides this, in doing our mapping, there's one of the independent dialogues happened around the urban food systems. And, with the food, within the main initiative of FAO on the urban food systems under the FAO framework for the urban food agenda has been adopted by FAO's intergovernmental committees and is currently being implemented in Kenya. It has been focusing on Kisumu and Nairobi. Besides this, we also have what we call the Green Cities Initiative, which has also gone up to Mombasa. And just looking at the issues around greening cities, FAO has a very ambitious program on this to reach 1,000 cities around the world by the year 2030. The urban food agenda seeks to leverage local government action to ensure sustainable food systems and improved nutrition. And this basically comes from the background of the level of urbanization in Africa and at global level is really increasing, and 70% of the food is consumed by urban inhabitants. So how do we continue with this movement and with this growing population in urban cities in Africa and in Kenya for this matter? How do we work with governments, with local governments, especially emerging also intermediary cities? How do we work with them to ensure that the citizens of those cities continue to receive safe, nutritious, affordable foods? How do we, the whole planning system around cities, around markets, around the food distribution channels within the cities. How do we ensure that they are sustainable and the overall food system is working for the populations? So FAO projects that Africa will continue to have the fastest urban growth in the world. Currently, there are 472 million people living in African cities, and it is expected to grow to 810 million by 2035 and double that again by 2050. So this is a situation, and the earlier we begin to face this challenge and tackle this challenge, the better. And given these challenges, we face the upsurge in, it is what we are saying, it is necessary for countries to redefine their policies towards realization of sustainable urban and local food systems. Reforming of urban and local food systems and shifts to urban and peri-urban food preferences and diets will have an influence on what is produced and how. I must say that this year we had what we call Afri-Cities that was actually held in one of the intermediary cities in Kisumu County. And we really, we went in to bring the agenda of food and food systems in Afri-Cities. This is a conversation that will continue, and I hope that, as our development work continues, we'll be able to continue pushing this needle to ensure that the attention on urban food systems is given what it deserves. So this transforming the urban food systems, as we say, requires the concerted action of many stakeholders and partners of the city, both local, national, but also at international level. This was a major conclusion of the UN Food System Summit, which paid particular attention to the urban food systems. We agreed that national governments need to include urban food systems in their policies and programs, capacity development, and financial support. And the local stakeholders need to organize and contribute to national policies and national systems framework. Local governments and urban administrations need to integrate food systems issues into urban planning and programs for access to nutrition diets, food environments, food waste. Should also be linked to functional areas such as health and infrastructure. So the work that goes to ensure that the whole planning around food system, goes to the level, breaking silos and moves to the level where the different departments of government, be it agriculture, health, infrastructure, and even the city plannings, deal with the issue of food system. So there was an emergence of the Urban Food Systems Coalition out of the UN Food System Summit. And this is a coalition of stakeholders that aims at supporting countries and localities in promoting sustainable urban food systems. And this coalition, as you see there, it aims to create space for dialogue, promote evidence-based actions, and enrich the evidence, and promote linkages between national and subnational governments to enable coherent food policies, leveraging actions by existing networks and initiatives for city-to-city exchange on integrated place-based food policies and climate action plans, and leveraging resources. So this coalition exists. I think it's also up to us to really, make this vibrant and ensure that this conversation around urban food systems takes its rightful place. In working, and I'm sure again, Sharon will talk about this as I conclude, in Kenya, we are working very closely with the government. We know that there's an intention to proactively activate and get the coalitions working with a clear monitoring and reporting framework and their steps. There's been a development of a position paper that we've worked jointly with government on, the intention to establish the food systems steering committee, the establishment of the technical working group for each coalition, the sensitization and capacity building, the development of action plans, communication campaigns, and then the monitoring and reporting. So these are the steps. I think there's been a bit of a slowdown basically because, we went through the election cycle. We are waiting for the new government to settle. And I think this process will continue. And in the coming weeks, I think there'll be more intensity in moving the steps forward. And in conclusion, what we are saying is addressing urban food system issues requires the horizontal coordination across food systems components and across stakeholders, but also the vertical, the global, the national, and the local. It is very important that the voice of urban and local stakeholders be heard in global and regional fora. And I think events like this one and the recommendations emerging from it contribute to promoting coordination amongst the various initiatives and to aligning the national and local government community around urban and local food agenda issues. I think finally, it is up to all of us to use the recommendations from the Kenya Food System Lab to make a tangible difference individually and in partnership. I thank you very much, and I wish you a very good deliberations in this session. Thank you very much, and back to you, Ivan. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Runga, for that very thorough presentation, capturing really the issues around food systems faced in the Kenya and the Greater Africa, and the very important role of governance and more integrated modes of governance in streamlining progress toward developing more sustainable food systems and very much more sustainable urban food systems. And then, yeah, also closing on that note, highlighting the things that are already happening in Kenya, which I think is very much inspirational. And I guess the question that we are trying to answer today is, how do we strengthen that what's already happening in terms of vertical integration and horizontal integration for improved food systems outcomes? And I look forward to seeing the conversations that we'll have around this. But before we dive into these conversations, perhaps just from an ICLEI Africa point of view, following up the presentation by the Food and Agriculture Organization, just to give a brief introduction exactly to the Food Systems Lab and what brought us here as a follow-up to the United Nations Food Systems Summit, and the outcomes of that, and then very much just the outcomes of the first lab, and what we're going to be talking about today, and what the aims are really of this session. So if you will indulge me just for a couple of minutes, I've got a few slides to share as well. Great. I hope that everyone can see my screen. So not to repeat too much of what Mr. Runga alluded to, I'll really dive into the nitty-gritty of today's session before handing over to Ms. McKenna from national government. So the Food Systems Dialogues 2.0, which is really what we here for today, is a follow-up of the first round of food systems dialogues that formed part of the United Nations Food Systems Summit. This year, we're conducting the food systems dialogues in 3 African countries and 3 Latin American countries, with a variety of cities participating in this process. We're using a food systems lab approach, which is the format of the engagement today, which is really about developing strategies and mechanisms for streamlining multi-level governance. Now, when we talk about multi-level governance, in essence, we're talking about greater coordination between the different levels of government, from a local level to a national level, as well as between different departments of government that fall on the same level. Seeing as food is such a multifaceted issue that as Mr. Runga also alluded to, really touches on all of the different SDGs, for instance, which really highlights the need for greater integration, for breaking down silos in the governance process and the setting of priorities. Then, moreover, recognizing the need for developing more localized approaches and strategies for addressing food systems, which is also such a contextual dynamic. So through these Food Systems Lab, we aim to bring together key stakeholders to really highlight actions and recommendations for how this can be achieved. So just to give you a brief overview of the timeline, we convened the first Food Systems Lab in Kenya in June, which was then also followed by city-to-city exchange between different African countries, in which Nairobi played a key role in sharing their insights around the Nairobi City Food Strategy. And then there was also conversations that we hosted in a webinar format between South American cities and African cities, also very much around this issue of multi-level governance and vertical integration. And it was very interesting to see how countries in the Global South context have emphasized this as a really necessary intervention point, this idea of collaborative governance. and seeing the progress that's been made on that side really, I think, highlights very, very important areas of focus that we need to open and explore in the African context. The outcomes of these food systems dialogues will also then be fed into international events such as COP27, where we aim to elevate the voices of local governments in these international fora, and to really strengthen the role that cities play in the food systems agenda and the developing more sustainable food systems. Now, just as a brief reflection on the outcomes of the United Nations Food Systems Summit dialogues, what we have here is an infographic that really captures 5 strategic areas and 10 critical actions for transforming urban food systems to more sustainable, to produce more sustainable outcomes. And what we aim to achieve with this second round of dialogues is a very similar kind of infographic that captures key strategies and actions that can be implemented by different stakeholders in the food systems, especially national government, for creating greater coordination. Now, when looking at these infographics, you will see that the issue of governance really came through quite strongly, and it was a central focal point throughout the dialogues. For instance, developing coherent integrated food system policies and invite multi-stakeholder engagements. Now, this is very much linked to multi-level governance. Then, as an overview of the first food systems lab, we had participants from a wide variety of counties, from Kisumu, from Nakuru, from Nairobi as well, and we also had presentations from the flags, but this was a very much more of a conversation around contextualizing the extent of multi-level governance and what the key needs are in order for us to really take this further. And what came out of this conversation is that there is a very strong need for greater coordination between local and national government. The policies and the strategies are in place, but there's still a need to really streamline and implement these actions. And this is really what we're trying to answer today, is how we can do this. Now, there's a very similar need that arose from this, which is a greater involvement of stakeholders that fall beyond the realms of government. And here we're really talking about the private sector, multilateral and non-governmental organizations, as well as the civil society. How do we engage with civil society to a greater extent in the governance process? And to build onto this, asking the question, to what extent are these commitments toward integrated and coordinated governance being reflected in resource mobilization and allocation, especially toward a more local government, which I believe to be a sign of a commitment toward more collaborative governance structures. Then another issue that I highlighted, seeing as there's very impressive and interesting work being done across a variety of counties in Kenya, is to really build on what's already happening, strengthening existing initiatives and benchmarking best practices so that different counties can learn from one another and collaborate with one another, which really feeds into the final outcome, is the need for intercity collaboration and coordination. For instance, especially around the issue of urbanizations, where big urban areas such as Nairobi are increasing and growing at very extreme rates, and the production potential within many of these urban contexts are very low. There's this opportunity for collaboration between different counties, where counties with a great production potential could meet the growing demand in urban nodes where the production potential is much lower. And this will also form part of the conversation a little bit later through presentations from Mr. Chege from Kiambu County. Now, following this is really, we developed the aims of the second lab based on the outcomes of the first one, and very much and very importantly, The first aim being to onboard newly elected government officials on ongoing food systems initiatives and establishing these partnerships to really build on what's already happening and strengthen and drive the really great work that's already happening, and further to also consolidate the role of the many multi-stakeholder platforms and government parastatals that are doing really great work in order to streamline and strengthen multi-level governance, and then also to bring in these actors that fall beyond the realms of government into this conversation, which really is already being done, and once again why we would motivate as much participation and engagement from the participants here today. And then finally, and very importantly, this is what we're after. This is the agenda that we've set, is to develop concrete strategies and recommendations for streamlining multi-level food systems governance and inter-county coordination. Here, we are really going to be on the lookout for key strategic recommendations and actions that could be implemented and streamlined in order to build and consolidate mechanisms for improving both vertical integration, horizontal integration, as well as trans-governmental integration, and that's very much around which the conversation is going to take place today. Is how do we do this? What can we do in order to ensure that food systems are governed in a way that's more collaborative, and that in which none of the silos exist. So I think we've already really touched on the issue of food systems. I think just to briefly take a step back and just highlight the following point, that when we talk about food systems, there's often this misconception that food is a mere product of rural production. Now, this conceptualization has expanded and shifted quite considerably as issues of climate change and social and economic unsustainability started becoming more prominent, to adopt a food systems lens. Now, a food system really captures all of the processes and outcomes involved in a greater food value chain, from farm to fork. And this really includes all of the actors and all of the impacts of this food system that's embedded in a wider environmental system on the people and the planet. And adopting this more broadened conceptualization of food as a system and a process really enables us as actors in the space to identify key strategic areas in which interventions are really most needed. So I'll just really fly through all of this, because I think it was already discussed, but in essence, this is what we're after today, is vertical integration, which we really see on the side, greater coordination between the national and the local level, really being explicit about what the roles of the different levels of government are in this governance of food systems. Is it a question where local governments must set their own priorities and strategies and be supported by national government through resource mobilization and allocation? And this is really a country to country question, but at the end of the day, this coordination is really what we're aiming to strengthen. And then there's also just this graph highlighting the variety of actors and departments in government that are involved in ensuring food and nutrition security. And this really highlights the need then for also bringing these actors that operate on a horizontal level together to really streamline progress. One really effective way in which this could be achieved, and which is already being driven in Kenya, and this is something that I think is really important for actors to strengthen, is this idea of multi-stakeholder platforms as spaces for governance and setting priorities and strategies for addressing the key issues within specific localities. We're talking about the food liaison advisory groups, the flags that are already operational in both Kisumu and Nairobi. How can we learn from these multi-stakeholder platforms to really drive greater collaboration in the governance space? As Mr. Arunga also alluded to, there's already a lot of things happening in Kenya on the ground and on a policy level for achieving greater coordination and greater multi-level governance, such as the flags, the Kisumu Local Interaction Platform. There's also the Nairobi City County Food Systems Strategy. And then on a policy level, also the Kenya's National Climate Change Act, which is in the context of Africa, really a game changer in terms of allocating roles to different departments, but in a very integrated way to address this issue of climate change. And I think from a food point of view, there's a lot that we can learn from this act and the actions that have been developed in order to achieve the aims included in this act. And then there's also the Marifa Center, which is being driven by the Council of Governors, who will also be delivering a presentation a little bit later today in this session. That's also really much around this issue of bringing these actors together in a way that's conducive and enabling for all. So that's all from me. Thanks very much. And once again, I invite all of the participants to really use the chat, and we'll ensure that all of the comments and questions included in the chat will be posed to the speakers. So I hope everyone engages in this session and enjoys it. And yes, I'm gonna hand over to Ms. Sharon McKenna from National Government for a reflection on the food systems pathways and progress that has been made in this sense. Thanks very much. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Ivan, and thank you to ICLE for putting this lab together. I think we had a very elaborate food system process in Kenya last year, and it's good to see that the dialogues didn't end then. So it's good that we're continuing with the dialogues. Allow me to put off my cameras to save on bandwidth. So at least you've all seen my face. So I'll share my screen. Hope you can all see my screen. So yes. I want to first start by saying that in the run-up to the Food System Summit last year, I think in Kenya we started the process around March 2021, where our cabinet secretary then was the national convener, and the Agriculture Transformation Office, where I am from, was the secretariat to the national convener. We had a very elaborate, exciting process with a lot of support from the room-based agencies. So I'll just take you through how we came up with our pathways, and just a quick overview of our agricultural sector in Kenya. We contribute about that 3% of the GDP annually and another 25% indirectly. So agriculture and the food systems in general is really a key sector in the country. We account for 60% of Kenya's total exports and provides more than 60% of informal employment in the rural areas. And we have so many players in this sector. So it's really an important conversation that we're having today. And it's one important thing also to notice that it's one of the sectors that are fully devolved. So a lot of the functions are with the county governments, while the national governments provide policy, direction, and capacity building. So I'll not dwell on what is on the right. I think it's more of an emphasis on what I've spoken about. So one thing I want to mention is that even as we were planning for the Food Systems Summit last year, Kenya is already, So the country already has strong foundations and commitments to the transformation food systems. First, our Vision 2030, and this is a document that dates back to 2008. That is when it was launched. We still have a few more years to implement it. It has been our blueprint for quite a number of years now, and it has continued to provide a policy direction in terms of food systems, looking at the ASALs counties, which form a big chunk of our country, looking at the fisheries, looking at fertilizer, and looking at agricultural reforms. So that has been our key guiding documents. Closer home, this is in the outgoing regime. We had a big focus we used to call it the Big Four agenda, and agriculture again was a priority. We had a pillar called food and nutrition security, and it really focused on large-scale food production, driving smallholder productivity, and reducing the cost of food to the local population. And currently what we are implementing, and actually what the Agriculture Transformation Office is charged with, is coordinating the implementation of the agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy. This is a 10-year strategy launched in 2019. We are almost midway in its implementation, and it aligns very well with the food system transformation. So for us, we were like, it's like we were ahead of the transformation conversation, and we've seen a lot of alignment with our strategy. So we have three main anchors in this strategy. One is to increase the small-scale farmer, pastoralist, and fisher folks income, and a lot has been going on here. I'll not dwell on it, but quite a lot of even what Tito was mentioning earlier. We have another anchor on increasing agricultural output and value addition, and here is just to increase our GDP from what I've mentioned to even higher, given that agriculture is actually the backbone of the economy. And also just ensure that most of our produce is value added here in the country. As of now, we export a lot of raw produce. And the last anchor, which is anchor 3, is increasing household food resilience, very key even as we face issues of climate change. So here, the main target is to reduce the number of food insecure Kenyans in the ASAL regions, the arid, semi-arid, and regions, from 2.7 million on average to 0. Not doing very well here. And I want to believe that the food system transformation conversation and commitments that we've made will help us move from this. As we speak right now, we have about 4.5 million people who are food insecure because of the ongoing drought. Okay, my screen seemed to have frozen. Can you see my screen? Sorry.
We can see your screen. Yes, Sharon.
I may not put it in full view, so apologies for that. Just in case it freezes again, I'll just try and expand. So in terms of how we've prioritized our commitments, especially to Agenda 2030, we have just here shown a few of the challenges that we are facing as at now. First is a high population growth rate. I think we have an annual rate of 2.3% by 2020. And this is exerting pressure onto the limited productive arable land that you already have. We've seen a lot of land subdivision, agricultural land being converted into real estate land. And this is really a big challenge that we have to deal with. We've also had adverse effects of climate change. Tito mentioned about this. And this includes higher temperatures than we've ever experienced, unpredictable rainfall patterns. We have more frequent droughts. And we really need to handle this if we have to transform our food system. We've also had increased livestock diseases and pests. We just came out of a desert locust storm in the last 2 years. We've had invasions of fall armyworm, which is still present as at now. We have African armyworm. Thankfully, this was an invasion reported this year, but as at now it's been controlled. And animal diseases. We've reported very high mortality rates this year for animals, and attributed to drought, but of course, drought also brings about animal diseases. So a big challenge there for us. And then, of course, we have underdeveloped raw infrastructure that limits access of produce to the market, low uptake and adoption of modern technology, and of course, declining soil fertility and disinterest of lenders to fund agricultural activities. I think in our financial sector, agriculture sector is one of those that are not very well funded. Now, in terms of interventions that we've been taking, and this is not exclusive, but just some highlights, subsidy programs that we've been seeing, strategic food reserves, a lot of reforms going on there in how we will enhance food reserves, promotion of large, efficient commercial farming. We are working on a land commercialization initiative. So very soon you'll be hearing how Kenya is moving towards utilizing public land for commercial farming. And then increased agricultural mechanization. When we move to large farms, we'll be able to promote mechanization and enhancing grain drying and storage facilities. In 2021, we launched the warehouse receipt system, and the council was also put in place to ensure this happens. So ideally, to address some of these challenges, there's a lot that is going on. And of course, revitalization of industrial crops, pyrethrum, cotton, coffee, tea, all that has been ongoing. Now, in terms of Vision 2030, I've already mentioned, sorry, I move back. Okay. Yeah, so I've talked about this. Sorry, I think it's a repeat slide. So I'll move to how we managed to do our dialogues last year. First, we had very elaborate regional engagements at the regional level. We couldn't do county to county, but thankfully our counties are organized in regional economic blocks, and we were able to reach each county through these conversations. We had very high level participants, including governors coming and speaking, and our PSAs, and also at the national level being in those conversations. And we had very, very good ideas on food system transformation. At the national level, we had two main dialogues. One was on policy. We called it the Policy Makers National Dialogue. And this is because this is the conversation we're having today. The need for harmonized policy between the national and county governments. And I think this dialogue really strengthened or highlighted some of the challenges that we need to address in moving, including better coordination and multi-stakeholder platforms like were being mentioned on how best to enhance policy implementation. And then we had another dialogue on innovation and digital transformation, because I think for Kenya, data is what we lack even at the moment to be able to make decisions at the right time. So following these dialogues, sorry, my screen froze again. Sorry, So following these dialogues, we came up with one vision as Kenya, and because we called it the Kenya's Food System Vision. And this is based on all these, you can see selective words, inclusive, innovative. So all these words were coined together to come up with a vision to build prosperity through inclusive, innovative, collaborative, and dynamic food systems that are based on data-driven decisions to ensure access to diverse diets from climate-resilient production in every region of the country. And we came up with 4 key leading actions to reach that 100% food and nutrition security. One is to increase the number of young people and women with access to productive resources, because we realized we need to tap into this opportunity of women and youth. And then increase the uptake of digital agricultural solutions, improve the diversity of diets, very maize-focused country, but if we improve the diversity of diets, then we'll be able to ensure that we don't put pressure on certain commodities. Then heighten climate change action. This is very, very, very important. So we also mapped up the partners and what each of the stakeholders and what their role would be. In this, we will continue to engage. As Tuto mentioned, we've had a few engagements here and there. We haven't really hit the ground running per se, but at least we've been having conversations here and there on how do we move. So looking at the 4 key leading actions and how we will do that. First, with the youth and women, we launched the 4K clubs and the Young Farmers Club. And this is to promote learning, agricultural learning in schools. And I think at some point, our curriculum lost the agriculture and we had not youth really pursuing agriculture. So we've reintroduced that in schools, and now the children in both in primary and high school are being taught agriculture as a career, not just a tedious or manual job. Then we hope to facilitate youth and women to access to productive resources, including land, capital, and agripreneurship skills. digitize value chain activities so that our youth have access to information. And then on digital and innovation, we want to harness the power of innovation and digital technologies. Kenya has a very strong mobile technology penetration, and use of that, especially for extension services and education, would be an opportunity to pursue. Investing in sustainable irrigation practices and investing in early warning systems, and including aerial solutions and geospatial technologies. On diverse diets, we just want to promote traditional crops, the sorghums, the yams, the millets, and the cassavas into our diets. India is working with the Ministry of Health to develop nutrition action plans to ensure there's diverse diets across board, restoring neglected traditional foods, like I mentioned, and diversifying production so that farmers can choose from a variety of commodities that are being consumed. And climate change, on mitigating climate change is by building the resilience of our people and communities, expediting ecosystems restorations, agroforestry and afforestation, providing conservation education and awareness to the communities, research and use of technology. So that's how we plan to implement our 4 pathways. But besides that, the 4 pathways, we joined, I'll put this on the big screen so that we're able to see. Kenya signed up to 4 major coalitions. And I would want to say it's not exclusive, but at that moment, these are the coalitions that resonated with the pathways. One was the Food Coalition, seeing that we were coming from a COVID-19 pandemic and the need for recovery. And now with the climate change and the current drought, I think this coalition is more important than ever, just to ensure we prevent future crises of this nature. On the School Meals Coalition, here is to ensure that every child can receive a healthy, nutritious meal. And during the summit, our president committed to reach 10 million children by 2030. This is something that is at the center right now. A bit of work has been done, and we'll be reaching out to stakeholders soon enough just to share some of the ideas that we've come up with. And just to mention one of them is using the flour blending initiative to promote diverse diets in schools. So we've come up with a concept note, and we feel this would be one entry point, not even just the school meals, but even the mainstream consumption. How do we promote blended flour intake? So this is something we'll be reaching out to our stakeholders possibly this month, just to share some of those ideas we have. Then on Coalition on Better Data, I know this coalition has changed names a couple of times. So now we're calling it Coalition on Better Data, Better Decision Making for Nature Positive Production. And Tito mentioned a bit about this. We've done quite a lot, including the farmer registry platform that has been developed. We are now putting together something we are calling Kenya Unified Agriculture Data Platform. That is, we call it a data lake. Like at the click of a button, you're able to access as much data as you can. So we are going to integrate a lot of these other tools that exist within the sector into this data lake. And as a user, you can be able to access data, of course, based on your rights. You can access data, you can import and be able to just use that data for the purpose with which you want to use it. Then the other one is Coalition of Action for Soil Health. This is a coalition that the decision to join this was way after the summit, but I think it's because of information coming that or data that we have on productivity declining due to our soil health. And here is just to ensure that as we promote production, as we increase production, that we are sensitive to our soil and ensure that we address issues of all factors that affect the soil to ensure we maintain productivity. So I think in brief, that's what I wanted to talk about, the pathways and the 4 coalitions that we signed up to. Like I mentioned, these are not exclusive. I think as we bring on board the new government, we'll be mentioning some of these things for them to be able to buy in and also even as conversations like this are ongoing, we'll be able to see what other coalitions could make sense or could marry with these ones and take them on board as we move. Tito mentioned about our next step, so I won't really focus on that, but really we've been working through the Rome-based agencies to see how Kenya can be supported in moving this forward. We've had a bit of a slowdown because of the transitions, but we believe now we're ready to hit the ground running as we develop our next national development plan, like the MTP4. We really want to focus on ensuring that the food system agenda finds its way in that, so that we also have not only our partners supporting us, but the government prioritizing this in terms of budgetary allocation. So that is the end of my presentation. Fortunately, my screen's froze again, so I'm not able to move to the last one, but yes, that's the end of my presentation. Back to you, Ivan.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that really thorough presentation. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but thanks for persevering and pushing through. I found that actually really interesting, and it's very inspirational to see the work that's already being done on a national level, particularly around the coalitions that are being formed around specific thematic areas. I think that's definitely an example of a concrete action that can be taken in order to strengthen greater coordination in governance, using these coalitions as an opportunity to invite stakeholders from government and from outside of government into the conversation and the setting of policy priorities. Also then the reflection on the idea of multi-stakeholder platforms to enhance policy implementation, which I think is a very straightforward and tangible way to reflect on how this idea of coordination could be implemented on the ground. And then to follow this very interesting presentation, we have Robert Kateme from the Council of Governors that will now just offer us a reflection on the importance of vertical integration as well as inter-county integration, especially around issues of food systems. So without further ado, Robert, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks. Robert, are you there? Are you with us? Robert, if you are speaking, I see that you're muted.
Let me try reaching him on phone. I'll get back to you.
Perfect. Perhaps while he's sorting out some of the technical challenges he's experiencing, he was in a call earlier and everything was fine. So we'll just give some time for that. In the meantime, we can shift from a national level into a local level, and hear some of the reflections, especially around the types of engagement that's needed on a county level with national government in order to really strengthen the role and agency of local governments in the food systems governance space. We have Patrick Mariri, who's the Director of Food Systems and Food Systems Programs of Nairobi County, who's going to offer us just some reflections on the Nairobi County food systems governance journey, as well as just a layout of the types of engagements that they need and the areas of bottlenecks that perhaps greater participation from national government could contribute in addressing. So over to you, Patrick. Thanks very much. I will share your presentation as we discussed.
It will be good. Okay, go ahead. Food system initiatives and aspirations for next. Okay, the layout of the presentation will be one to look at the role of the county government in the food system, then linkages with the stakeholders, as well as looking at the strengthening the inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food system. The fourth bit will be on the role of organizations in delivering sustainable food system outcomes, and also the political goodwill or political class support. Next. On the role of the county government, we looked at Nairobi City County. There was the creation of the Food System and Sector Programs Directorate in the year 2018. And during that period, we also started the process of the forming the food system strategy. And this one was approved actually earlier this year, and it involved various stakeholders. And in the process, we also created a number of institutions such as the FRAG. And we have also seen that we have some vertical linkages with other levels of government, especially at the county level and also at the national level. Next, please. Okay, okay. As we were going through the journey to for governance for Nairobi City County, we realized that there are already existing policies, and we focused on 3 major ones. The first one being the Vision 2030, that included other things as improving the delivery of extension services, strengthening of research and development, other issues like fertilizer cost reduction through subsidies and so on. We also looked at the national food, or borrowed from the National Food and Nutrition Security Policy. And this one mainly focused on the providing quantity and quality food, which is made accessible to all. Then the third policy, and this one is the uniting key document in our country. That's the Constitution of Kenya. And in it gives that every person has the right to health, also freedom from hunger, and also access to adequate and safe food. So these are the main documents that we looked at and read the background. Next. Then as we looked at the policies, we also tried to stitch from the system approach. So that's the one that we used, such that on one side we have the supply, and on the other side we have the demand side. And in the supply, this is where you're having the farmers, this is where you have land, this is where you have environment. And basically what we are saying is that this is also where we have the socio-cultural issues. And then on the other side, then we are translating to the consumption. And here you have our customers, you have the consumers, and they also have their own issues like their values, the knowledge they have preferences, and of course they also have different income levels. So we looked at that, and the key thing is that we are looking, as has earlier been alluded to, we are looking at from the food system from farm to fork, or from or the way the food travels from the field again to the fork. Next, please. Then at the very end, we came up with some the strategy, and the vision of the strategy is to have affordable, accessible, nutritious, and safe food for all Nairobi City County residents. That's what we would like to see at the end of the day. And we try to break this one down into some 4 objectives, basically mirroring the 4 nodes. That is, we're talking at increased food production. We're also talking about stable food supply and incomes, that is at the market price. We're also trying to see that we can have food loss reduction along the whole value chain. And we're also looking at consumption, whereby we're looking at the good welfare of the food consumers. So in this case, that's also where food safety comes in. So those are the main objectives that we had for the strategy. Next, please. And then as we went through the strategy, you note that we are looking at the linkages with the stakeholders. And here we looked at the horizontal linkages with the stakeholders at the county level. You notice that at the county, we have different departments, and we needed to talk to one another such that this idea of people staying in their own silo is broken. We also looked at the production, and in the production here, you need the input provisions. You also need the land. You also need the capital. So these are the basics of production. Then we also need to look at the distribution. How does the farm produce move from the farm gate or from the farm level to the market, and then to to the wholesale market, to the retail market? So we have that distribution chain. Then you also notice that food will normally be processed. So we're also looking at processing, and we have value addition, even packaging of various food commodities. Then the consumption, here we are looking at the linkages with stakeholders as we look at food safety, awareness creation on how food should be handled, how it should be stored, how it should be moved. So these are some of the issues that we're looking at there. Next. And here now in Nairobi, we're also looking at production, and we have various production technologies. And I'm just going to have some pictorials on a few of them, like the hydroponics that we are having in some space in a secondary school, just a small space in Kibra. We also have a similar one, the hydroponic, a similar one at a farmer's level called the Victor's Farm. So it's just a replication of the same, where we are, as you can see from the photograph, where we are growing some vegetables using the hydroponic concept. Then we also have the corn garden as well as the greenhouse. So these are some of the production systems that we are using. Next, please. Okay. Again, we also have other technologies, and these ones we are also trying to make it attractive, especially also to the youth, like the wick garden. We also have like the cabbage production down there. We also do trainings on the same technologies, and even there we actually also do a bit of some advocacy. And here you have His Excellency the Governor being taken through how to make some artificial food from the avocado seed by a group from one of the groups that we have trained. Next. Again, here still some other training sessions dealing with the dairy goats and other dairy, and even training some farmer groups. This is all within Nairobi. And for those ones who are in Nairobi, if you actually walk through the streets of Nairobi, you may have come through this poster whereby we are advocating for separation of waste. And you'll see the different colors on that. So we are bringing in also the advocacy on separation of waste, or the idea that waste is not just waste, and we should not just put it together. Thank you. Next, please. Then how to strengthen or have an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food system. This one we are trying to do through the information sharing between the different stakeholders. And like even now, this particular session, we are sharing information with one another, and this one will make it more resilient. Again, we are also looking for adequate funding levels for adequate implementation of projects and programs. So we'll keep lobbying for this, so that the raw levels can be improved, so that we are able to meet the food gaps. We're also doing also relying on demonstrations on technologies, innovations, and management practices. And this one still also includes the disruptive technologies that we see so much now in the digital media today. So these are some of the ways that we use. Next, please. When also we look at the roles of organizations in delivering a sustainable food system outcomes, we notice that high on the list are the research institutions, and these ones drive research. They drive data collection, analysis, and also processing, and they are very important. And in just within Nairobi, we have University of Nairobi, we have Kenyatta University, and we have other universities that are also doing research and other institutions, and we keep on encouraging them so that because we realize that they also have the food system agenda as part of their curriculum. We also have the civil society organization, and this one is also very key, especially in consumer awareness and food safety issues, since they are always bringing these issues out and very powerfully at that. We also have the private sector. The private sector is very instrumental, especially in the distribution chain. And we see this in terms of moving the basic commodities from production areas to consumption areas. So they are the ones that own the transport, freights, and all that. And we're also looking at food recovery. We're also looking at food waste management. We're also looking at infrastructure development. And this private sector, it's really coming into aid, as you're going to see in a few slides next, that the food waste, food waste is not just an eyesore. It is actually a resource that can be used, as you're going to see later. We also have the UN bodies such as FAO, and this one, they have provided mini grants to some of our groups. They have also helped us in food waste management, like in the, as Arunga had said, on the Green Cities initiatives and so on. And we also have the national government, and here the Ministry of Agriculture, the Agriculture Sector Development Support Program that supports production or supports within the software for or training or capacity building of staff across the country and also within our county. Next, please. Then we have the roles again of the organizations in delivering sustainable food system outcome. And this one has come out very clearly, especially on the political goodwill support that we are enjoying, such as, for instance, last week we had the Nairobi International Trade Fair, and His Excellency the Deputy President, and also His Excellency the Governor of Nairobi City County, they came to the stands where we had the controversial waste management, and they really encouraged the youth. We also note that when there is involvement of decision makers, they actually help in increasing the funding to the sector, as well as supporting youth in agriculture. Again, you also notice that the involvement of the national government and non-state actors in development of, for instance, the CIDP and budgeting process. So these are some key roles that we continually see within our ministry. Next, please. Here are just some pictorials, just to confirm what I've given earlier. And there we see the photograph of His Excellency the Deputy President and the Governor, and they were visiting the stands. This was really encouraging for us when the decision makers are able to come to where we are and where we are doing our production. Next, please. Yeah, again, this is again His Excellency the Governor. He was being taken around by our staff to the various stations where we were, the food system issues were being discussed or being shown to the general public. And yeah, we can really appreciate that. Next, please. And then what are the resilient food system strategies that we see is one, the extension and capacity building of the urban farmers or groups, or they could be common interest groups. We also see integrated agroforestry in productive ecosystems. We also see adopting gender responsive approaches to support equal access to food system activities. There is also the fourth one on sustainable land management in terms of soils, water, and the animals that are being raised. And you also see another arm where developing market-oriented value chains and the greening of existing value chains could be a good strategy. Next, please. Then on stakeholder involvement, mainly a bit of some pictorials, like in the forestry and land use. Here we are involving, or rather here we are planting trees in institutions, and we are involving the youth. We are involving the youth, and you can see you can see them there. Next, please. Yeah, again, involving one of the institutions like the prisons, and you can see the officers, both the county officers and who are doing the actual planting of trees. And here we note that we like planting trees in institutions because the survival rate is very high when we do it in schools as opposed to open ground. Next, please. Yeah, here is a bit on food waste recovery and processing. This is a group that we have trained in Korogosho. That is a market, and they are basically starting with the waste where they are doing the sorting. Then they move all along and they bring out different products from the waste. So actually then food waste is not just waste, but a resource that can be used to make other products. Next, please. Again, the same scenario on a Korogosho market. We have the briquette making, and then there's something probably you can see about the farming culture. Here is where you get the food waste, and then we are using some worms to break down the organic matter and to make compost. Now then the compost can be used for crop production or even for growing of flowers and so on. And then down there, we have soap making from waste potato, and we also have composting from also the general waste in the market. Next, please. Again, in livestock production, here we have officers again from the county demonstrating on fodder conservation in terms of silage and also hay. So this is an appreciation, and this was at the showground. We also have the fisheries, and this is a school within Nairobi whereby we have a fish pond, and at times when the fish are harvested, they are used to boost nutrition or to boost their food base in the school or in the meals. So it's a way of dealing with malnutrition. Next, please. Then we also have the veterinary services. They are very key, and they help in controlling livestock and diseases and such. Next, please. Yeah, we are almost done. And again, on food safety, we have meat and fish inspection, again by the veterinary services. So those are some of the key things. We are almost done now. And as a parting shot, we say that we continue engaging with the stakeholders for implementation of the strategy. We also encourage that the stakeholders get involved in specific areas, and we continue networking to form a partnership. And of course, at the very end, we have improved governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Let me just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, that was really interesting, and I think something that it really showed us is all the food systems initiatives being driven in Nairobi shows us how important this idea of food systems are. Looking at the work being done in Nairobi, you see the variety of stakeholders that are being pulled in and the variety of focus areas from waste processing as well as production, all being addressed quite thoroughly. And I think that just showcases how just stepping back and viewing food as a system as opposed to just the production element of it could be really useful, especially when it comes to driving sustainability and resilience within the food system. So I thank you for that. Before we hand over to Mr. Thomas Chege from Kiambu County, I'm just going to check if Robert Kiteme, if you're with us from the Council of Governors.
I'm there. Sorry for that.
No worries.
Yes.
Your audio is slightly low.
My audio is slightly low.
There seems to be a slight problem with your audio.
Okay.
Hear me now?
Perfect. You're loud and clear. Thanks very much, Robert. Over to you. You are currently on mute. There we go.
Oh, you can hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Thanks. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So let me try to share the slide. Hope you can be able to see my slide.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. I would wish to share a few thoughts about how horizontal integration among counties can be able to be integrated to enhance food systems and the reasons why it is really important. If you look at issues of climate change and Africa, the impacts on climate change are really felt, and food security is increasing day by day. If you look at Kenya, the severity of prolonged drought, floods, and landslides is affecting access to food. Especially currently, we are experiencing drought, and 3.5 persons are highly affected by the drought. If you look at the ASAL areas where there is a lot of marginalization, and also they also face water shortages, land degradation, and food insecurity, increase in disease and pests, especially for livestock, and then their capacity to be able to adapt and be able to unlock the area potential, especially on issues of improving food systems in those areas. If you look at our constitution, which earlier Sharon had already talked about, majority of the functions in the agricultural sector and the trade devolved to county governments, including the functionality of crop development, animal husbandry, issues of trade regulation, markets, and also cooperative societies, which are key essentials in terms of driving the food systems. In terms of why is this important? If you look at our Intergovernmental Relations Act, it gives the counties powers to be able to collaborate in delivery of their functions. If you look at our value chains, they are not specific to individual counties, and the majority of them cut across several counties. If you look at the demands for value addition and market, they are not specific, they are specific to quantities, which sometimes cannot be produced by individual counties, meaning there is need for aggregation so that we can be able to meet the value addition demands and also the markets. If you look at quality assurance and standards, they are not county specific, and they are informally supposed to be employed upon across the whole country. If you look at the county policies and legal frameworks, they are not unique to the county in terms of enhancing trade. And so thereby there is need for collaboration to ensure that the legal frameworks and policies by the county do not deter investment in the agricultural sector, and neither do they enable counties not to trade among each other, and also they don't affect our relations in terms of trade with other countries in terms of meeting the needs of those countries. My colleague from Nairobi has talked about the issues of diseases. If you look at the challenges we have been facing across, including the locusts, the kulea birds, and also the issue of the armyworm and all that, they are not really specific to a specific county, and they majority of the times they tend to affect majority of the counties which neighbor each other. If you look at the livestock diseases, because of livestock movement during trade and all that, and especially now currently in northern Kenya, where there's a lot of migration due to search of pasture and water, there is a lot of problems and challenges when it comes to the management of these diseases. In terms of the way diseases are managed in terms of vaccination for livestock. And so there's need for a common frame so that counties can be able to collaborate and ensure that they work together towards managing some of these challenges of transporter diseases and pests. In terms of investment in water and irrigation, if you look at the majority of our water towers, they are found in one specific county or two, and the rivers flow through several counties. And also the use of water is done after harvesting is usable in other counties, especially the dispute between Murang'a and Nairobi because of the water which is coming from Murang'a. And we are saying there is need for counties to be able to collaborate, discuss, and see what are the benefits across these counties in terms of where the source of water is coming from, and also the areas where the irrigation is taking place. So those are my thoughts, Ivy, in terms of why we need this collaboration, in terms of enhancing the food system discussion across counties, so that we can be able to have a harmonized way between the counties, and also to enhance food systems and also enhance food access by all the Kenyans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. Very much appreciative of including the perspective of the Council of Governors in this conversation, especially around the issue of governance in food systems in Kenya. I think that's very interesting, and we'll be very interested to hear a little bit more about that when we get to the conversations about existing strategies and initiatives that are ongoing. And speaking of which, next we have Mr. Thomas Chege, who is a representative of the Kiambu County, will now offer some more reflections on this idea of inter-county coordination that Mr. Kiteme just spoke about, and then also some of the support and engagements that are ongoing with national government, and what has been working, what has been some of the key challenges, and what are new ways in which this can be done. So without further ado, over to you, Mr. Chege.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I don't know, Van, whether I should share the screen or you can share.
Whichever you prefer. You want me to share?
You can share. Yeah, you can share.
Give me 2 seconds.
So in the meantime, what I'll be sharing on, as Ivan prepares to share the screen, will be exactly what is happening on the ground. Actually, we have very good policies, we have very good declaration, we have a very good write-up, but what exactly happens on the ground, yeah, it's not different, but there are some things to address. So mine will be on basically, I'll introduce you to the Kiambu County. As you see, this is our first interaction. Also talk about, I work for a program called NARI. Then we look at basically what does the food system entails. And we look at the at least 4 various chain, which we are working on. Then there'll be on the governance, what issues are there, and then the opportunities. So like I said, I work for National Agricultural and Rural Inclusive Growth Project. This is a World Bank funded project, and I'm the County Community Development Officer, which means actually I'm the one who are in touch with the farming communities. NARIG is, like I said, it has 4 components. The first component is which one? Heading, component 1. It deals with the smaller groups, or what we call common interest groups. Then we have component 2, which is on produce organization. Component 3 is on multi-community investment, and component 4 is on coordination. So let's see how Kiambu is. Kiambu, yeah, next. As an opening remarks, there's something interesting about farming. that whenever we talk of being a farmer, despite the fact that all of us consume food, we eat at least 3 times a day. When you are young, I don't hear people saying, when I grow up, I want to be a farmer. But with time, people have realized actually farming is a big business. And that's why now everybody have turned to what you call farming. Then in Kiambu, we have a sort of sub-counties or what you call constituencies, and the population is high, which means we have high, we should have high production, but at the same time, we also have high consumption, because if you consider a population of 2.4 million, that is high. And you can see Kiambu, Roiro, Juja, and Thika. This one is more of urban or peri-urban. So what Patrick was talking about, urban farming applies here. And since it's next just to where the farming is being done, what it means, the consumers are here. So that's why we can say Kiambu is well placed for production and also for market. So we can go to the next one, which I think Patrick also turned. Next. Yeah, basically in the food system of all over, not just in Kiambu, it has various elements. And I'll touch the one Patrick did not touch on. The first one is food production. That is where the whole process starts. And it is, each one of them is a package, because even for food production, we talk of access to input, green seeds. Yeah, you also talk about soil fertility and all that. What basically makes or increases or decreases food production is one, the comparative advantage. Like you can see, some areas, they are better placed for, like Githogori, is better placed for livestock farming and dairy farming. And like we are going to see that in terms of dairy. Then with the comparative advantage, one would produce what is easily produced in an area based on the agroecological zone, the amount of rainfall, yeah, and then the production per area. Then there is also the incentive to produce. A product can be easily produced, you can produce it in high quantities, but it doesn't fetch a lot of money when it goes to the market. And farmer will switch over from this to this, because from a certain product to the other. For example, like now coffee prices have increased in Kiambu. So you see most farmers, they are going back to coffee. And again, at the same time, dairy milk prices have gone up. So most people now, they are concentrating on the two. And they put a lot of effort and they put a lot of capital on that, and so that they can increase the production. Then the other thing people consider, of course, agriculture in Kiambu somehow is a culture. People do farming, but with the time, they include what we call technological innovation and management practices. And that is what increases the production. With that, we also consider some other things like food safety, the food I'm producing. There is what you call household consumption. What you are producing, can you consume it? If yes, that is the right product to go to the market. And like somebody said about the rising climatic change, there's a rising issue of that the demand might be higher than supply. So is that tendency that the food is yes there, but is it safe for consumption? Then we come to the distribution and aggregation. The ideal situation of distribution and aggregation or marketing is where farmers can join together and they market as as a group, or they can market as an organization. In this, we have various cooperatives, like dairy cooperatives. We have various people also trying to market on their own, what they call direct marketing, because the consumers are just in the next door. And this is popularly known as the business across the fence. That I can produce milk in my shed, then I sell to a consumer who has found a bedroom and is working in Nairobi just to my next house. Then there's food processing. Food processing actually mostly occurs when you talk about industrialization, but it is there even at a home level, where somebody might think of, maybe I have a lot of milk, I can make yogurt or something. Then there's the marketing generally. That one is through Nairobi and also the consumers in Kiambu. Then on that, as there's the food pathway in the food system, where whatever you have, how do you prepare it so that it can be useful to the consumer? Initially, we used to talk about balanced diets. Now we are on food groups. What do you eat before what? What should I eat? What are the same nutrients? That is more about the preparation and consumption. Then on resource and waste recovery, I think that was very well covered by Patrick. So we can move next. Next, please. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So in NARIC program, in Kiambu, we are concentrating on 4 value chains. That is dairy, chicken, potato, and we are going to see in all of them how the funding is and the progress we have. So we can go to the next slide. On funding, as far as NARIC is concerned, funding is done on what we call investment window. SRM, that is Sustainable Ag Management, dairy, potato, and banana, and chicken, they are funded in what we call SRM stroke value chain. And the maximum the farmers get per group is 500,000. On market oriented, this one is on more of business, and the maximum farmers get is 200,000. There is a vulnerable and marginalized group. These are the groups which are at row level. They are funded up to 100,000. On nutrition, this is where we talk of more of consumption pathways, and the funding is up to 50,000. That is what Patrick presented, like maybe a school group can be funded as a pocket crab or any other. So currently, what has gone to the common interest group is 212,337 and 367. So we also have funding about, that is 550 groups which have been funded, that is a common interest group. We also have 120 more groups, 253 groups so far at out of 220 million. That is what is remaining, because the program is ending up, is winding up in June next year. So we can move on and see what actually is in the ground for value chain. So we start with the dairy. So next slide, please. Yeah, like you can see, yeah, just back. And yeah, okay, we go back to one more slide where we see we have the, yeah, that is silage making. Yeah, that this is where we have a zero grazing unit. In the production of or the food system we have in dairy, you see most of the farmers have maybe quarter of an acre, maybe a maximum of 1 acre on average. So the animals are confined, which means that the source of feed is external. Yeah, this zero grazing unit is where we have cutted carry system, but due to a small unit of land, we use what we call fodder conservation. That is why we have in the next slide silage. And currently, the average milk production per cow per day is around 12 liters. So we can move to the next one. Next slide, yeah, this silage making, yeah. So what usually happens, the common interest groups, in addition to fodder conservation, the further groups have gone to what we call feed formulation. That is where a group of 30 people have been funded with 500,000. They buy a mixer, they also buy a hammer mill, and then they can formulate their own feeds. That is has become, it might not be as much as cost effective as one might think compared to the industrial one, but they are assured of the quality because they have a target of how much milk a cow should produce. So maybe you can go to the next one, and we see the aggregation center. So the next one, this is one of yeah, maybe you can go back to the one on the aggregation center. This is one of the what you call milk, bulk milk coolers, where farmers bring their milk, and after correction, it goes to the processing. This is in Gatsudu North, where we have Mang Progressive, where they are aggregating their milk. You can move to the next one, where they have a pasteurizer. Yeah, this is the Katamayo. This is in Rari. All this is being funded by the NARIC program. And they have received a pasteurizer. You find that the milk, the shelf life of milk, it's short, but when you pasteurize, at least you can market it. And it is more hygienic when you sell it, when it's pasteurized. And actually, there are rules and regulations on how you should market the milk. That is why there is a need for pasteurization. That is it for dairy. I use this as an example so that we can see the complete food system, which the others should have, but in Kiambu, dairy is the most established. So the other one is chicken. For chicken, it is still in the process of being advanced because chicken, like I said, based on the comparative advantage, is being practiced everywhere, but at a various degree. For example, most in every homestead you see a chicken, but those who have a commercial, they are very few. So this one, you can see some innovation. Yeah, they have, you can use jerry can, you can use the one you buy from the shop as feeders and drinkers. So you can go to the next value chain, that is potato. On potato, the farmers are adopting what you call good agricultural practices, where they do the right spacing, they do soil testing and all that. And in the next slide, you can see that they are harvesting. You can go to the next slide on potato. Yeah, the farmers are harvesting potatoes together. And so far, yeah, the next slide, please. You can see them harvesting. Currently, we have 5 tons per acre, but the best we have had so far using good agricultural practices is 13 tons per acre. That is too ambitious, but most farmers are going up to 9 or 10 tons per acre. So banana growing is being established. You're also adopting the good agricultural practices like resuckering, then the right hold and the rest. So that is all about the value chain. We can go to the interaction and yeah, we can go to the next slide. That is on the governance in the agricultural sector. You find that agriculture as it is at the county, yeah, there are some roles which has been left in the, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, agriculture as it is a default function. But at the same time, when it's come to the cabinet meeting, even at the national level, food security is a national issue. So those are some of the things like Sharon was saying, we need to discuss where there should be no boundaries because it affects all of us. Then you find that even in the allocation, also Kiteme mentioned about that agriculture for sector, whatever is allocated is usually below what has been discussed in various forums. Like Maputo declaration, there was that there should be 10% allocation into the agricultural sector. But since, especially in the counties, whatever you collect as revenue is not for actually for creating revenue, it's for regulating. Like for example, if it's meat inspection, people pay for like 100 shillings for maybe the permit, or meat inspection, they pay around 200 shillings. That is for regulation. So the allocation in the agricultural sector is below minimum threshold. But by and large, there are some also other sector which are allocated more money, but they are not production sector, because at the end of the day, what is collected from the market, what is collected from a food store, all of it is from agriculture. So that is the point for discussion on governance. We can go to the last slide. That is the opportunities. Yeah, there are several policies, formulation issues, which actually need to be harmonized, and that is the opportunity. For example, currently, there was a policy on the 50 kg package for potato. It was in some counties. So it's like when you move from a certain county to the other one, nobody will ask you how much you have packed or how many kgs you have packed for one bag. So they need to be harmonized. We also have development program. Like now we have NARIC in Kiabu. We also have a agricultural sector development program. These are the programs which we need to have clear integration between the national government and the county government. Because when it comes to county, after every 5 years, and there is a kind of change of government. So before the new regime understand, there is some delay even in the implementation. The other thing is on good agricultural practices. In the market, we also have something like when you are marketing or exporting, there is a global gap, global good agricultural practices management. So if we want to have a market, external market, we must harmonize this. This is at the national government. The other thing is extension services. What you find, we have various research institutes, like Kenya, we have CARO, Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Organization on research. You also have universities. All these are developing technology. Even at the county level, there is farmers innovation. In our extension, we have not integrated that how all these technologies should be brought together so that the farmers can get the right technology, because all of them are doing some innovation. Somebody writing a research or in the university, after getting the academic papers, maybe that is kept somewhere. It will never be used, but it was something which was developed. So this is a point of entry point, and we need to discuss about it more and how to integrate. Those are the opportunities. So thank you very much. That is my interaction.
Ivan, you're muted.
I realized that just now. Thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Chega. I think it was really interesting, especially the reflections toward the end around the issues of governance and what's needed. And I think your perspective in this actually adds a lot of value to the conversation. Also being a representative of a county that's not necessarily urban, but also being so closely linked to the farmers, who are often the stakeholder that's completely neglected in the conversation around issues of governance. So I think you having a deeper appreciation of the challenges faced by farmers and the opportunities that there are to develop, especially smallholder farmers. I think is really interesting and a very important consideration for national government. So thanks very much for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Paul Manga from Kisumu County. I believe you are with us, Dr. Paul Manga. Dr. Manga, can you hear us? I see you are on mute.
Hello.
Hi. Yes, perfect. There we have you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've been having a number of challenges when the meeting started, but at last I've gotten into the meeting long after it started. And thank you very much, Ivan. I can't access my PowerPoint, but I'm going just to give a brief about what is happening on this side of the country. Kisumu is the third largest city in the country with a population of over 400,000. It lies in the western part of Kenya and around Lake Victoria. The region where Kisumu lies is mainly a sugarcane growing area, and rice is another crop that most people grow for food and a cash crop. With sugarcane and rice, a good chunk of good land that could be used for other crops for diversification of food, I think, is gone. And over 50% of the food consumed in the city is imported either from the surrounding neighboring counties like Vihiga, Kakamega, Kericho. This is especially the vegetables and fruits and even eggs gets imported into Kisumu. With regard to food system, we have just finalized a study to collect information on the current food system situation in the city and the surrounding. Kisumu City is located in Kisumu County, and I think that is a city within the county, and that also makes it unique. The study collected information on food production systems, the actors involved, the food outlets, the biophysical and environmental drivers to the food systems, the policies, and the value chains. And this is going to be very important for us because we want to develop a strategy for food system in Kisumu. And before we get into that, we need to get information and data to help us drive the process. Actually, the key challenges have been identified, and we have come up with some 5 main thematic areas that we should, that should form the basis of our food systems strategy. This study, I think, was finalized last week, and we met with the consultants, and we agreed on the way to move forward so that we can get the strategy very fast. Ongoing work, actually, as has been said by other speakers from Kiambu and from Nairobi, we have been promoting urban food systems. And as has been said, I think in Kisumu, we are promoting vegetable production and poultry and other small livestock production within the city and in the peri-urban areas of the city to improve nutrition. In the promotion of of vegetables, we are looking at the production of the African leafy vegetables and other green vegetables. And we are using the micro gardens approach, which we are demonstrating to the farmers within the city and in the peri-urban areas. And now it's picking up very well. And we have seen by using these approaches, the production of vegetables has started picking up, and now they have started getting into the markets within the city. We are also promoting poultry production and fish production. Actually, poultry production, we are providing a number of farmers, a number of city dwellers with one-day-old chicks, and we are training those farmers to get involved in the egg production and even poultry for meat consumption. Fish, we are getting farmers into fish ponds. As has been said from Nairobi, we are doing that. And the city being just next to the lake, we are getting into the lake through fish cages also and trying to get fish produced in the lake. We have a program on greening the cities where we are trying to create green spaces within the city, and we are trying to rehabilitate the recreational parks by planting trees and fruit trees, such that when people are there, they can get shade and they can even get fruits at times. Actually, we have engaged schools, primary schools and institutions within the city and outside the city in tree planting. And we have engaged almost 12 schools now in planting trees. And even with the micro gardens, we have brought in a number of schools that we have given the equipments for micro gardens. And we are also looking for schools with children who are living, who are vulnerable. We have given them some of these equipments for micro gardens, and they're doing well with that. Food system, in food system, there must be waste management. I think Kisumu has done well. Now we have identified a place where we take most of the waste from the city, and it is being, we have where we separate different types of waste. The organic waste, the bottles, we separate those, and the organic waste goes for organic manure. And we are also engaging our communities to produce organic manure for use to improve food production. We are working with a number of institutions. Actually, we have a number of stakeholders involved in this, including NGOs and various government departments that are assisting us in this. And the FAO and World Food Program has really assisted us in this again, and we have to appreciate the work we have done with them. I think even that is a brief I can give us at now, and thank you very much for involving us in this. Yeah, thank you a lot.
Great, thanks very much, Dr. Manga. Appreciate the straight to the point and brief presentation. I think we're a little bit pressed with time, so I'll hand over to our next speaker, Ms. Agatha Tuo, who will now offer a very important reflection, one which is also very often missing from the government space, and that's the perspective of private sector. She's the general manager of the agriculture sector network, and we really look forward to your presentation on this tool. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan. My name is Agatha Thuo, and I'm working with the Agriculture Sector Network as the General Manager. Agriculture Sector Network was established slightly less than 3 years ago, and specifically for purposes of supporting the private sector on issues that are very, very important and very pertinent to the private sector. It is the umbrella body for private sector actors, and we are very happy this afternoon to participate in this conversation because we too have made commitments towards this direction. I'm trying to look for my presentation so that I can share it on the screen. Unfortunately, I don't seem to see it. So, okay, let me just see. I hope I can share it from my side. Give me just a very short time. If I won't, then I'll just give. I know, interesting. It looks like I'm already sharing. Okay, let me stop sharing. But in the interest of time, let me say that the Kenya the Agriculture Sector Network is the umbrella body for private sector actors, and specifically we support our membership, which is drawn from business member organizations, associations in the private sector. We also have SMEs, micro, small and large, and we also have financial institutions that are working in that space. So the private sector too is very committed towards this process, and just like the other partners, we are very committed to an inclusive food systems approach in Kenya, one that is bringing all the collaborators together, and one that is not only innovative, but also very, very dynamic, especially because the private sector is in business, but at the same time committed to supporting the food systems agenda to ensure that we have diverse diets, building on, again, on climate resilient livelihoods. So ASNET deals with the 5 key strategic issues, one of which is continually consolidate the private sector. And this is important because as we address the issue of food security, safe food, it is important that we enhance capacity building and strengthening amongst our BMOs that are very important in delivering this agenda. Again, it's important that the private sector has a common approach to issues of policy, regulation, and also advocacy, because it's apparently very important too in the private sector space. And therefore, ASNET was formed again for this very purpose. We are also very much, as private sector, interested in inclusivity, because without the youth, then our businesses will fall. And again, a lot of innovation is coming through the youth in the agriculture sector. Women, again, we recognize the importance of women. So inclusivity is also part of our agenda. And least but not last, value chains development, capacity strengthening of our businesses. And it is important to mention here that ASNET does not work for the BMOs, but we support our business member organizations specifically to be able to deliver on their key mandates. Again, we build their capacities in areas of leadership, in areas of governance, and also accountability, because we must deliver also as private sector. And I would like to mention here that the private sector under the umbrella of ASNET has a memorandum of understanding with the national government, specifically the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, to be able to work with that level of government. And we are seeking one with the Council of Governors. I'm very happy to see that Robert is also in this conversation, Robert Kiteme. We are seeking one so that we can strengthen collaboration, which has lacked in the past between the private sector and the two levels of government, including the development partners as well. It's also important to mention that the private sector has also become one of the members of the Intergovernmental Forum, Agriculture. We are now a three-legged stool, in fact, four-legged, because we also have the development partners on board. And specifically, ASNET represents the private sector in this space, which is very important. I will go straight into what the private sector is doing as far as strengthening food systems and governance is concerned. And one of the key areas that the private sector is focusing on is mobilization of industry investments into scientific research, research and development, and also innovation. I think looking around, you've seen a lot of innovation by the private sector. For example, we have a lot of digitization at the moment, which is an initiative by the private sector. We have seen a lot of increased adoption of ICT, social media communication, so that we can enhance communication amongst players in the various value chains. And the other thing is that important to note is that specific value chains have also organized themselves very well into associations, especially along the staple foods. For example, part of our membership comes from Cereal Millers Association, Cereal Growers Association, the East African Grain Council. And this is very important so that specific thematic issues around the associations can be sorted out at that level with the support of the umbrella body. And as I said, the private sector is also doing a lot to strengthen inclusivity. We have programs to support the youth in internship, bringing on board the youth into the agriculture space, especially because they are very conversant with the technology, and particularly the modern technology. The other thing that the private sector is doing is acceleration of private sector investments in agriculture with the focus on sustenance of business environment reforms and competitiveness. And our key enablers here is promotion of governance and ethical businesses and the sustainable infrastructure development and for sustainable businesses. And you can see, especially with regard to infrastructure development, there is infrastructure that is without reach by the private sector, and hence the need for collaboration so that the private sector can have good roads, both at the national level and particularly at the county government level, for free flow of goods and free flow of goods and services from the national government and also from the counties and back. And most importantly, also for collaboration, especially in investments like cold storage facilities at the county levels. And that's also very, very priority for private sector, because we need fresh, as private sector, we need fresh produce for milling. We need safe produce for milling and for value addition, which will come from the counties. And like the speakers have mentioned, agriculture is a devolved function, and hence the need for us to work very closely with the county governments. It is also good to note that the private sector is also putting more investments towards, like Robert mentioned, pest and disease control. Under the umbrella of ASNET, we have the Agrochemical Association of Kenya, which is supporting the members in capacity building, in increased research, investments in research on pests, pesticides, and this and also supporting the farmers in private sector-led extension service. Yeah, I think as you move around, you can see a lot of agrochemical companies have also put a lot of investments in capacity building of organized farmer groups at the county level for purposes of increased production and the control of disease, pests and diseases at that level. Private sector has also not been left behind in embracing mitigation against climate change. And to this effect, we are doing a lot of capacity building of our members in climate change mitigation. And last year we were able to launch our, early this year, we've been able to launch our private sector-led climate change strategy. Specifically so that we can enlighten the private sector on the need to increase investments on climate change mitigation, including technology, more cost-effective technology for purposes of irrigation and other interventions. But because of the time, I would not want to leave this conversation without mentioning some of the challenges that the private sector is also going through. And one of the challenges that we have been talking about, not just now, but over and over again, is that we have a lot of Byzantine requirements for starting agribusiness initiatives in this country. And there is a lot of need for the two levels of government to work very closely with the private sector so that we bring this to acceptable levels. It takes a lot of days to register a business. It takes a lot of time, and the bureaucracy is still a lot compared to the required and acceptable international standards. And this, of course, is making agriculture very uncompetitive, especially agribusiness. And it is a disincentive to the private sector. This is one of the challenges we've been having. And I hope this is a conversation that we can continue with both the national government and the county government as we strive towards strengthening our food systems. The imposition of VAT on agricultural inputs, I think this goes without saying. We have all appreciated the escalating cost of fertilizers and other farm inputs in this country. The cost of fertilizers just recently was at 6,500 to 7,000, which is out of reach of the farmers and definitely going to compromise production. We have a subsidized fertilizer, but it is still not adequate. And I think from our end, subsidies, of course, compromise markets a lot. We have been making strong recommendations on a sustainable way of bringing, even if not to the original level, at least bringing down the cost of fertilizers in this country. And I would really like to thank the national government because of our regular public-private dialogues that we've been holding. The policy and regulation overreaches and overlaps, they also affect the private sector a lot. For example, we still have very unclear delineated responsibilities between the national government and the county governments, which is a bit confusing to the private sector. And I think we need a lot of clarity in this area. And I am very happy that this is one of the priorities that the president has actually brought on table when he said that he is going to devolve or to release all the functions that really belong to the county government so that private sector can know where to attend to some of the issues. And then, of course, we also have a lot of limited incentives for private sector agriculture financing. Worth noting is that the financing of the agriculture sector by private sector is only at 4% because of the limited incentives that exist. And we are talking about this for a sector that is capable of going beyond 34% contribution to the GDP. Never mind that currently we are not there, but we have been able to reach that level. So we need incentives to be able to invest more financing into this sector, which is very, very important to everybody. I'm happy that the Council of Governors is here because this is an issue that we have also been raising with the Council of Governors, that we have a lot of duplicity and multiplicity of cesses and levies charged to the millers, to the cereal growers as they translocate produce from one level, from one place to another. For example, for a commodity like maize that is moving from Busia to Uganda and passing through so many counties, it ends up making the product very expensive because along every county, levies are being charged towards that aid, making, of course, food inaccessible and expensive. And I think we really need to work together to bring those issues to normalcy and to make strong recommendations for that are sustainable and recommendations that you bring down the cost of foods in the country. And we also have lack of elaborate PPPs, modalities for agricultural investments. For example, we've been discussing the issue of leasing land to the private sector so that we can increase production. We can increase the space that is allocated for food, public land. And at the moment, our irrigation investments are only at 2%. Within the African continent, we are at 6%. But a continent like Asia is at that 7% land covered by irrigation. And for us to be able to increase productivity, we actually need to invest in irrigation as a private sector. But we need a good framework or a framework for leasing land from the public sector, which is in existence. We've supported the government to the Ministry of Agriculture to come up with a land leasing framework, but the modalities of implementation are still not very, very clear. I'm almost there. And the other issue is the low public funding of this sector. It was initially at 10%, but we really need to see an improvement of that. For a sector that is contributing so much to the GDP, we definitely need to see more investment in that area. I'm almost done, but I would really like to take 1 minute just to do recommendations. The zero rating of VAT to reduce the cost of production. We need to see the levels of taxation adjusted, an increased allocation to the sector, and the delineated functions. That is also very, very important to us. And of course, the incentives that I've talked about so that we can all work together. And I'm looking forward to a dialogue between the Council of Governors and the private sector, and also dialogue, increased dialogue, structured between the national government and the private sector and the development partners as well, the stakeholders that are very key in sustaining the food systems in this country. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'll share my presentation. I'm sorry that I just couldn't share it here, but I'm going to share it with you, Ivan, so that should anybody be interested in getting it, they can also get it. Thank you for your time.
Wow, thanks very much, Agatha, for that. I think very, very insightful perspective from the private sector. I think something that really stood out for me through your conversation is how private sector and public sector are actually partners when it comes to the food system, with all of these shared interests and also very much codependencies, with separate agendas maybe, but the two are inseparable, especially when it comes to the food system. And I think that came through quite clearly. And also then the thorough overview of the challenges faced by the private sector and being followed up by some key recommendations. I think as a follow-up to this dialogue, perhaps a good idea would be for us to host another dialogue between the private sector and the Council of Governors and relevant stakeholders, as well as national government and key representatives of the private sector, just to take this conversation further and strengthen this really, really important partnership for the well-being of the economy, but also the people and the environment, I think is something really important to consider. And we thank you for sharing those important insights with us. So last but not least, we're going to hand over to Mr. Albert Waweru, who's the chair of the Nairobi Flag, which is a multi-stakeholder platform in Nairobi for improving food systems governance, identifying key strategies and programs for addressing issues related to the challenges in the food system of Nairobi. I think it was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers how these multi-stakeholder platforms offer a means of implementing policies on a local level. And I think that's really where the power lies. And our multi-stakeholder platforms, such as the flags, could be viewed as the foot soldiers on the ground, because they consist of a variety of stakeholders that form part of government and that generally fall outside of government, to really identify and contribute to the policy making process, but also the implementation thereof, which at the end of the day needs to be done on a local level. And we're really excited to have you with us, Mr. Waweru, and very excited to see what you're going to be sharing with us. So over to you. You are on mute, just to inform you.
Am I okay now?
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivan. I want to start by apologizing for not joining the meeting early enough. I had a problem with the technology. As Dr. Manga said, I'm with him that sometimes we have a problem in this technology. But eventually I came in, and I want to say thank you. Perhaps you may allow me to find out whether we have a participant by the name Vera, who is supposed to be our secretary in a Nairobi Flag. Is Vera there? Vera from Kenya Farmers Association. Well, even if she is not on this meeting, I wanted to introduce her as one of us who is our secretary to the Flag. Allow me to be mentioned that Flag is a tool that is has been introduced so that we can this tool can be utilized in identifying challenges and finding solutions. Also finding out getting out the innovations that are there, the new methods, so that we can look at it and then have solutions to them and recommend those solutions. So it's a very important tool, especially for Nairobi. I believe Pat has already mentioned all these stages. The office is very new, although we have started now interacting with the other stakeholders. And I want to mention that Flag is also welcoming Oxfam. We have been working with them because of their program. Mazingira Institute is also with us. And recently, we also gotten the GAIN on board. So we are actually inviting most of these stakeholders to come on board. And before I forget, I want to say that Agatha should now be able to join us and give us the insights of her interaction, because before she goes out, we need to attract her in Nairobi so that we can gain more from her. And I think that is that's the way forward. We will invite her to come on board so that we can also tap. In Nairobi, we have identified 3 key food products, that is dairy, poultry, and vegetables. Urban farming has its own problem and challenges, and therefore things to do with the land, things to do with water, things to do with also governance, as a sort of, you realize we have a city that require all of us to be there, and there are some regulations. Luckily, Nairobi hasn't been identified as a agricultural county also. We can produce food. We welcome, or we have been trying to tap in the new technologies. Mostly, some of them are vertical, others are horizontal. And for that purpose, we have been trying to see how do we identify those challenges of food path, so that Nairobi, although we cannot really feed Nairobi ourselves, but we can also assist in making sure the food path is clear for all of us and to enjoy that system. FLAG, which is a food liaison advisory group, is fairly very young. We are going to have our first meeting maybe before the end of this month. And we are inviting most of these stakeholders to come on board. I have learned a lot from Kisumu also and Kiambu, and I think we are not very far off. FLAG is headed by a private person, which is a private sector. And I was elected to steer this. And we hope we are going to learn from our counterparts as we move on. And for now, I think we are on the right path. So thank you very much, Evans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oweru. That's really nice to hear about the flag, and I think especially this role you play in identifying challenges and finding solutions, especially on a local level. And I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had around how exactly it is national government, especially as well as county government, in liaison could support this process. Of course, very straightforwardly in terms of resource allocation and mobilization toward this. But perhaps, and I think once again, sorry, you were our last presenter, Mr. Oweru, so we've now stepped into the very exciting phase, and I'm very happy that we at least have around 20 minutes for conversation. I was afraid at a moment that we were going to run out of time. So before I will start maybe asking some targeted questions. I think it's really important to give all of the participants an opportunity. The chat has been quite quiet, but perhaps if there's anyone present in the meeting who has any burning questions, especially around this issue of governance and how we can strengthen coordination between the different levels of government and the different stakeholders within the food system. So I would like to give all of the participants an opportunity to, if you have a question or even if it's just a comment around this issue, to please raise your hand and direct it to a speaker or to ourselves. So perhaps if there's no direct questions from the the participants. There's a few things to me that came up in this conversation. Definitely some key strategic areas, but something that stood out for me very much in the beginning was in your presentation, Sharon, when you were speaking about the coalitions and the 4 different coalitions that have been established by national government. I was wondering maybe if you could perhaps give us a little bit more information around this. What kind of stakeholders are you drawing into these coalitions, and to what extent has this led to identification of key problems and strategic actions for improving issues around especially food systems governance? Sharon McKenna, are you still with us?
Yes, sorry. I'm here, yes.
Did you get my question?
Just kindly repeat your question. I was a bit distracted. Sorry about that.
No worries. My question was just around the coalitions that you were speaking about that are structured along these 4 different kind of thematic groups around food. And I was wondering if you could maybe just give us a little bit more information around this, especially in terms of the stakeholders that participate in these coalitions and to what extent it has led to actual implementation of strategies and programs.
So I'll start with the Food Coalition, largely being led by FAO. So for this one, the stakeholders really, we are targeting all partners in the ministry. First of all, the ministry, the sector ministries in agriculture, that includes water, lands, environment, and all those ministries. I have a mapping for those stakeholders. Let me see if it's something I can quickly share, if you allow me, so that I speak and people can follow what I'm talking about. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so we have the FAO. We were calling it FAO because FAO is leading this coalition. And you can see here, we are looking at Ministry of Agriculture, we are looking at Ministry of Health, Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise, ICT and Innovation, Environment, East Africa Community. We have a joint intergovernmental forum called JASCOM. So it brings together National Ministry of Agriculture and COG. So this is a very key organ for us. Of course, COG, we have the economic blocks because those are the ones that really helped us in convening the dialogues. And ASNET, and Agatha has been part of us in this process. And a few other private sector players. For school meals, it's WFP, who have been leading on this. We have UNICEF because of children issues concern worldwide. I've seen a few representatives here. And this is not exhaustive. We were just mapping it out just so that as we begin these stakeholder engagements and conversations, who do we have on the table? And the list could grow on as we move along. Better Data is Ministry of ICT being a key lead in this. The ASNET again, and our partners across board, agricultural sector partners. And then on soil health, we have the ministries, the sector ministries, we have smallholder producers representative, because really this one is targeting, reaching out to the farmers, teaching them more of regenerative agriculture and good practices. CALRO because of research, FAK, this is the Fertilizer Association of Kenya, and all these other partners. So this is initial mapping, And like we had said, we would want to each of these coalitions to have a technical working group, so that these are the team that meets, they come up with action plans. We already know there are things happening across each of the coalition, and we would want to map what's happening, who's the partner in that area, what kind of funding is available, and then promote synergy as we move forward. I hope this helps a bit.
Absolutely, and I think these coalitions are such a good example of multi-level governance in action.
Yes,
especially if there's an element of implementation. If there's, and as you say, a technical working team, I think is such an interesting way to ensure that there is actually outcomes of these coalitions. And I think that's definitely a very interesting recommendation that we can take forward and share also with other countries. This idea of establishing coalitions around specific thematic groups, and then also drawing in the county governments, I think is extremely important in this regard, to ensure they also have a space to implement these ideas, but on a local level, where the contextual dynamics, of course, are a very important factor to take into consideration. So I see we're getting some questions rolling in. I'm going to give around just 10 minutes for the questions. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So we have a question from Rebecca Tanui, which is directed to the cities of Nairobi and Kisumu, which the question is as follows. Have you considered working with the management of markets such as Malakiti and hotels to address food waste? So this is very much a question around food waste, and then also working this issue of markets, which hasn't really come up, which is has been brought up as a very interesting site of experimentation for driving food systems transformation. And perhaps before I direct the question to anyone specific, I will leave it open to either Patrick or Dr. Amanga to respond. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ivan. Actually, I was just typing the answer, and I was saying that literally we have engaged with the market community, and we are doing a pilot project whereby supported by FAO and implemented by the staff from the Nairobi City County, as well as from Practical Action, where we have trained 100 youth on food waste management, and they are part of the photos that I was showing during my presentation, and that's what they have been able to achieve. And we are looking forward, because that was a pilot, that we can replicate the same in several markets, and we are actually seeking for funds. So if we have a partner who have some funds and they would want to use them in that way, they are more than welcome to work with us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Dr. Manga, I'm not sure if you would also like to respond.
Evans, can you get back to the question? I didn't get it well.
Sure. It's just, have you considered working with the management of markets such as the Malakiti and hotels to address the issue of food waste?
That is very, very important, because the issue of food waste, the biggest chunk of food waste comes from hotels and the open air markets. And in Kisumu, we are looking at the market management, especially the big open air markets like the Kibuye market and the Jubilee market. We are looking into market management to help and assist in food waste. And actually, we are working with them to identify areas to put the waste and how it can be taken to our waste management site, which has been identified recently. And with hotels, I think the hotels, the way they manage their waste is also different, because you find they sell most of the waste to other users. Yeah, and I think this is an area where we should come up and find a good way to work together. And thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Paul. So there is one more question, and perhaps I'll ask anyone that has a direct answer to this question to perhaps raise their hand or just reply in the chat. The first question is a question around what happened to the National Farmers Information Service, NAFIS, which was the question was asked by Nicodemus Umondo. And which also just emphasized this, that how useful this was for food producers, this National Farmers Information Service. And then also there's another question also around food waste, which is there a government body that has comprehensive information regarding the state of food loss and food waste in the country? So and if there's anyone who has a response to this question, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, just respond in the chat. I think we are nearing a time where it's time for some closing reflections. But I think something that really stood out from this engagement is the necessity to continue engagements and dialogues between different stakeholders, but not only to use these dialogues not only as an opportunity to share ideas, build partnerships, and create mutual learning platforms, but to actually lead to concrete action and implementation. And I think a recommendation by Agata from ASNET was to have a follow-up dialogue with the likes of the Council of Governors, who are, of course, in the space of collaborative governance are one of the leading actors. And then to also for national government to have continued dialogues in which they invite participants from across the food system space into. But then there's this question of the gap that still exists between a national and a local level, with a wide variety of representatives of county, all facing very unique and contextual challenges, whether it's a highly urban context, an intermediary city, a peri-urban context, or rural. All of the challenges that's faced within each of these constituencies is extremely different, and that is why this idea of dialogues are very important, but also to establish programs and policy frameworks that empower these local actors to really address the issues, identify and address the issues within their own constituency, and to develop mechanisms and ideas around how these actors could be empowered. And I think that's really what we're after. And I think from this conversation, there were definitely some interesting insights around this that emerged. Very, very excited to see the outcomes of the coalitions established by national government and the extent to which this really empowers local governments to prioritize and address and develop their own strategies, like we've seen being done in Kisumu and having been implemented in Nairobi. And then there's also this one very important thing that came out of all of the presentations of the county representatives, and this is this adaptation of a food systems approach, which needs to, of course, be rolled out across all levels and spheres of government. Is this approach to food systems not merely focusing on production, but a wider system that aims to nourish people, but also contribute to economic development and also environmental sustainability, which are, of course, major considerations, especially as we've heard with the severity of droughts just increasing in Kenya, to really put our minds together, bringing people in from across the context and forming collaborations between different counties where droughts maybe aren't as severe, where there's a high level of production potential, and establishing partnerships, because at the end of the day, we know that these crises are just going to become more severe, and we really need to integrate resilience into our planning and thinking of how we can best do this. So that's just some closing reflections from our side. This is definitely not the last gathering that we'll have in Kenya, bringing the stakeholders together. I think it's we all agree that a follow-up engagement is definitely necessary, especially bringing ones that are more focused on bringing very key strategic partners together around the table to have conversations around these things. But before we officially close, I'm going to hand over to Tito Arunga or another representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization to perhaps just offer some closing remarks from your side. I'm not sure if Tito is still on the call.
Ivan, I don't think Tito is in the meeting. He had to step out for another engagement. But I think I can just give a brief or maybe possibly also reflections from what I picked up from the conversation. And I would like to thank all the stakeholders who joined us in this forum, the Kenya Food Systems Lab. It has been interesting also getting the different dynamics and perspective of stakeholders. We've had reflections and contributions from the national government, the Council of Governors, which is really what we are looking for when we were thinking about this conversation of continuing the food system dialogues at city level, with the main question of how do we enhance coordination between the national government and local government. And you can see that in Kenya, we also have a very unique system whereby we also have the Council of Governors that is playing a critical role in enhancing this coordination between national and county government. I think a lot of opportunities exist. And I think as we continue on with this conversation and looking at especially the pathways that were shared by Sharon, the pathways that were arrived at during the food systems dialogues in Kenya, looking at what all the stakeholders and all the players in the food system are doing, I think there's already movement towards actualization of those pathways in different ways. But I think there's an opportunity for even greater collaboration in ensuring that we are able to achieve our objective by the time we reach the year 2030. How do we get the youth and the women on board in transforming the food system? How do we move towards the conversation of addressing climate change, considering that also cities are playing a very big role and contributing to the whole climate change issue with regards to all the food system activities that are taking place. We've seen that there are various coalitions that Kenya is part of, and different partners, including the UN agencies, are part of this coalition. And I'm sure even the private sector, as Agatha was saying, Agatha mentioned what they are doing with ASNET. Many challenges faced by the private sector. And I think most of the time when we are talking about food systems, we know that the government and development partners will create maybe the environment for the food system to thrive. But the food system is driven by the private sector. They are the ones who are investing resources. They are the ones who are ensuring food is distributed, is produced, is packaged in the right way, it reaches the community, including the most vulnerable. So I think from the discussion and from some of the questions raised, we really need to think about how do we ensure we also create this environment whereby the private sector is able to operate and thrive and ensure that we have a sustainable food system. Again, when discussing about the role of multi-stakeholder platforms with what has been presented by Nairobi, Kisumu, and especially the chair of the flag in Nairobi, also presents an opportunity for us to see how do we build on these platforms? How do we strengthen this kind of coordination? Because for the food system, for the transformation we want to see, we have to look at all these different layers and multiple kinds of governance within different layers, whereby we have the national government, we have the local government, we have the private sector, we have all these other institutions, community-based organizations, NGOs. So how do we enhance this coordination across all these different layers and strengthen operations among the stakeholders so that we're able to transform our food system? So I think as I wind up, I would just like to maybe ask us, maybe we need to think about, as you're saying, it should not be the last conversation, but I think as partners who have been in this meeting today, we need to build on this further with the COG, with the national government, the cities that are involved here and all the counties and all partners to see how we move this conversation towards greater coordination. Is there an opportunity for us to build a local food system network, especially at city level, to ensure that we continue on this discussion? Because I believe it's not only an opportunity for dialogue and discussion, it's an opportunity for us to achieve critical action beyond the dialogue, for us to achieve critical commitment from different partners on how we can transform the food system. So we can explore opportunities for creating a local network of cities within the country. We know Kenya is urbanizing at a very fast rate. Now we are at 4 cities, and even more smaller towns exist within our country. So it would really help as we steer towards a direction whereby our cities are urbanizing and we also have a sustainable food system. So I would maybe like to call on us as all partners that are present to see how we enhance this collaboration and coordination, and also mention something that was mentioned by Tito about the Urban Food Coalition, which is a coalition that is aiming to enhance greater coordination between national and local governments, and possibly in the near future, there'll be an opportunity, because Sharon said that the coalitions are not exclusive. I think that's the word she used. So there is an opportunity for countries to plug into the Urban Food Coalition to ensure that we are able to promote this engagement further, build on synergies from each other, and enhance the coordination across the national and local governments. So thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and also once again, thanks to all of the presenters and all of the partners that were on the ground and made this thing, this food systems lab a major success, and absolutely look forward to many more future engagements. Before we wrap up, perhaps I can ask that all of the participants just quickly switch on their camera, that we can just have a quick photo with everybody involved, and then we can officially close.